Welcome to Life is Good. I'm Heather McEwen, your ever loving hostess, and guess who we have today?
He rocks in the treetop all the day long, hopping and a bopping and a singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, tweet, tweet. Rockin' Robin, tweet, tweet, rockin' Robin.
We have Daniel Tumwesigye, and he's in Kampala, Uganda right now. And sit tight. You're going to enjoy this show because this is one interesting man. Good morning, Daniel. Or in your it's 4:45 or 5 o'clock where you are, p.m.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone.
You know what? That's what we were talking about. Everything should be included, right? No,
Right,
no matter what time of day or your entire existence, it should all be considered one great big continuum.
right.
So you've got a master's of public health and you are working with SASH Vermont, but you're in Kampala, Uganda. How
I
did these
am.
two worlds how did these two worlds get together?
My life is full of surprises and it's full of positivity. So, all the time in my life, I believe where I am is where I belong. So, I work for SASH Vermont, a subsidiary organization with Cathedral Square, whereby we work with several, people across Vermont of different status, disabled or older people throughout the state of Vermont and Rhode Island. And what we do is, what we do with that organization is we reach out and make sure the wellness of each and every being within our operations they're taken care of holistically. Taking care of finding housing at the same time taking care as far as their health is concerned. So on every property that we work on every property that we own or work around, we have a nurse on site and we have a coordinator that's there. But my role there is I'm the quality assurance and implementation specialist, whereby we implement and make sure the search fidelity is met by all our staffs and find ways of improving the lives of people one day at a time and one person at a time.
That's a good goal. Are these residential homes?
They're residential homes, yes.
And where are they in Vermont?
They're all across Vermont. Every county we have different properties.
And what is the reason that most people go in?
Basically, it's like it's comfortable. It's the best place you can be at like when either you're grown up or you have some form of disability. When you have somebody inside that can take care of you, I feel like that's the best place to go to.
Is the age group broad within that
It is.
population?
It is, yeah.
What is the youngest person you can take into a SASH home?
Well, that's beyond my say because we have people who communicate all this. We have like a communications director who does all that. But from my point of view, I think it's open to every age bracket. From last time I had somebody was like 20 years old, but it depends on their status as far as health, as far as whether there's any form of disability and stuff like that.
And who refers them to you? How do they find you?
Everyone, like we're connected throughout the state. The state, like the Vermont state healthy environment. I mean, the state. What do you call it? The Vermont State Health. I mean, VDH, Vermont Department of Health, Agents of Human Services, and then also local people like within the state. They
Hmm.
will. It's in their website. The people can just even sign up, and
Okay.
if
Are you
they go.
federally funded, and do you feel threatened because of all the cuts that are happening these days?
That's another topic that I cannot touch on, but I
Okay.
feel like if we were, uh, then I wouldn't be working there anymore.
Well,
But
people are on the chopping block that don't even realize it. I'm just praying to God that you are not on the chopping block because you do such good work. And before the show, you and I were talking, and I said I don't remember how you came into my life. I don't remember our our first interaction or why I felt compelled to call you or get in touch. And I thought you were in Africa. I thought you were wherever I was seeing whatever you were saying. And it turns out you are now in Uganda, but you actually live in Enosburg, Vermont.
I do. I live in
Talk about
Innsbruck.
weirdness because I had no idea you were a local fellow.
I
And
am
I
a
said,
lot of
this is
stuff.
so amazing. But we were talking that nobody gets put into your life for zero reason. There's always a reason and there's always a blessing in it. So let's
Right.
hear about
Yeah.
what you do. Let's hear about what you do when you're not doing SASH work because that's pretty fascinating too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm originally like I have a strong belief that maybe you got connected to me through some of the community outreaches we do in Vermont. But there's so much been into like networking people, more especially the Christian world. So annually we do what we call worship exchange in Innisbrook Falls, and we bring people from all over the world, more especially the worship leaders, like people who sing in different churches. From my point of view, like last year, we were networking with over 130 churches all across Vermont, and we were able to coordinate and network all those churches. And in September 7th of last year, we hosted the first annual worship exchange a festival. We called it festival because it was a 2 day event, and and then we hosted it at the Innisbag Park, like
And
that
Taylor,
park.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel
I'm,
like that's why you connected me. Eh?
I used to do weddings in that. I used to do weddings in that park. Local people would ask me to marry them, and I always chose that park if I could, if I wasn't doing it in my own backyard. It's gorgeous
Oh,
there.
wow.
And a
It
shout
is
out to
beautiful.
Franklin County, where I lived for about 35 years.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah,
so
we
it's
did that. We did that, and it was really great. We had worshippers, of course, from Uganda. We had worshippers from Boston, from Texas, from New York, and all across Vermont. Of course, everybody was involved. Radio stations and all the media platforms that are operating, local, like what is that called? Anyway, all media, like local medias, outlets, they were all involved in that, and it was very wonderful. And we have another one coming up, by the way, September
when
6th,
is when is it?
September 5th and 6th, and we will
Okay.
be having Jason Apton. For those of you who know, Jason Apton is a worship leader who has been in worshiping for, decades, 20 years plus, and it's wonderful music.
And you're non-denominational.
Where?
That's an open invitation to anyone from any faith.
Right.
So if you happen to be Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or any or Hindu,
Anyone. Mhm.
everybody is welcome. Because in my world, a faith is for humanity, and it doesn't have
Yeah.
to come. It doesn't have to come from one dictated source, and
Nope.
uh, and that's very liberating from people who can't make up their mind.
Exactly. And to give you to give you a quick testimony, on that day, we were enjoying the music and the people and the food. There's food also involved. There's a lot of also donations. I think we had some a gentleman who has an organization whereby he distributes clothes and backpacks for students who are going back to school. So they come and they also set up their tents and other vendors all around, and to donate and connect with people. In other words, it's an event for music, but at the same time, we are connecting people to resources within the community. So during the event, there's this gentleman who was there. I mean, he was walking like town, like how people walk on our main street. And then he had music. He was like, "Oh, let me just chill here for a second." Long story short, at the end of the event, he wanted to know more. He was like, "What is this? What is this all about?" And then we were like, "Yeah, we're Christians and we're worshiping God. And if you need anything, let us know, whether prayer or anything." Anyway, he ended up giving his life to Christ, and then that did not stop there. Then we connected him to the local church. Came to realize the next Sunday, he came to testify that that day he had made up his mind to go and hand his life. But when he came in there, that music kind of cut him short. It was like he cut his itinerary for the day. And, the prayer, the music, and the way people were positive, that changed his perception of, handing his life. And today, he's alive testifying for just one day that saved his life. So this is what we do. Like, you never know what you're up to, but God is a medicine.
Well, I believe that. The power that comes from within. One of my very favorite movies is Chariots of Fire. And there's one point when Eric Liddell, the Scottish runner, throws his head back and at a tough part of the race. And the dictation, the voiceover says, "And where does that power come from?" And of course, he was a missionary to China, Pentecostal, and or Presbyterian. I know it starts with P. Anyway, he was killed in China shortly after the 1936 Olympics, or whichever Olympics he was going to at that point. It was earlier than that, I believe. But where does the power come from? If you're not a religious person, if people who are watching this have no faith, but they believe that there's an energy in the world, whatever you call it, I don't believe it can all be generated from within one being. I think it can be an internal motivation, an internal catalyst, but the external has to come from somewhere. And I'm just, it's empowering, literally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's empowering to not have to lean on the world by yourself.
Right.
And that's probably the best part of getting a non denominational group of people together where they can lean on each other as humans and then realize that the humans they're leaning on are walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So they pay
Right.
attention.
Right. Right.
And, you're talking to somebody, you know, the skeptic. And not anymore, but I think everybody goes through a time in their life when they think it's all within themselves and I don't need anybody or anything. I just do it all myself. And getting knocked off an ego pedestal is pretty pretty great.
No. No. Yeah.
Now, you talked to me about your earliest life too, to get back to what was your basis of actually getting all this faith. You say it's from your parents, but being raised in Kampala, Uganda, after the terrible oppression and dictatorship of Idi Amin, wow, your parents got through that. How did they get through that when everybody was being macheted to death and shot just for the sake of it? That was a traumatic thing to be born into, Daniel.
I know. I would say, if God wants you to be in this world, you stay in it, regardless of who's around you, who's taking care of you. But yes, my parents did a great job. We were born seven of us. I'm the fourth in my family, one mom, one dad. Besides the dictatorship, era, they also struggled finding, resources. In other words, we grew up by faith, to be who we are today. Going to school for the, I mean, I know our viewers here, most of the viewers here in the US, you cannot even think about going to school because, if you can't afford private school, you can go public school. A bus will pick you from your door. At least most states,
Hmm.
but in Uganda here, that wasn't the case. Okay, you have to go
Describe
pay
describe
tuition.
your describe that time for me, for yourself and your parents, please.
Yeah, so when you have kids, it's not just a matter of feeding them at the house, but you also have to take them to school and pay tuition for everything.
And you had
So
seven in your
imagine,
family.
exactly, imagine we are seven of us, and everyone has to go to school, and it was tough for them. So sometimes, we could miss, going to school because they couldn't afford that. And then in those moments, those who are a little bit older, they could just, walk around, like work for people, fetch water because we didn't have, piped water. That's another thing. The US, we don't even think about water because almost if you don't have water in your house, you can just go to the park and then you get a faucet and drink it. Here you gotta fetch water. So they could fetch water for people like walk 10 kilometers, which is like 5 miles, or between 3 and 5 miles to carry 20-liter jerry can or bucket and give it to somebody. Somebody will give them maybe a cent or 2 cents, and raise money for the next semester. But here we are. We survived. Most of my siblings, we got educated to the extent that we can work for big organizations. We can run businesses. We can do all the things. As a matter of fact, most of them have traveled in different places of the world. People who are born in the era of like, hey, this you cannot be bigger than people in power. You
Yes.
cannot be wiser than people in power. you know, the era
Yeah.
whereby those who are not connected to the bigger offices, you are like nothing in the world. But it turned around. And
You're
here we
living
are.
in it's a
Mhm.
democracy now.
It's democracies, yeah.
Some would argue that we are going in the opposite direction in the United States,
Really?
into more of a dictatorship than a democracy. And as your parents and you have lived through the dictatorship, are you doing anything in your ministry to encourage people to realize what we might lose with the changes of laws and a biased Supreme Court?
Yes, we do encourage people to be self-sustainable in whatever they do, because when you put too much faith in those offices up there, you may end up losing it. So
Boy, oh boy,
you,
that says a lot.
yeah, if you put too much faith in everybody, the offices up there, you may end up losing it because they usually do the opposite.
You know, it's funny that you should say it that way because I just wrote a story last week about an organization here. They lost federal funding. It was a thrift store, and they were federally funded and what we call NEK-CA, and it's Northeast Kingdom Community Action, and that it does so much around here for people. But the rug was ripped out from under them, and so certain citizens got together and said, "Well, that's okay. We have each other. We have a community. We have a need for this in our community." So now it's being run. It opened on the 24th of May. It's called the Seymour Thrift Store. It's reopened under volunteer capabilities only. How
And
about
it's
that?
going to be powerful. It's going to be powerful, I believe so.
And it's more powerful without the funding because once a
Exactly.
person, and I look at the welfare mentality of, well, this country, people say, well, we'll get a handout. We can apply for this. We can apply for that. We can get this. And God bless them. I think I've been in a very I've been in several situations where I qualified for that stuff but never applied because I'm terrible with paperwork and I'm proud. False pride, yes, maybe. But I thought, once you start taking a handout, you stop doing for yourself. And I wanted my kids to watch me do it for myself, even though they went without. Nothing wrong with going without. You have to make do with
Right.
what you've got. So,
Right.
so when I see government funding being taken away, I think that actually might strengthen the foundational fiber of individuals and groups in this country. It might return us to the days of my grandparents when they make do rather than saying, I'll be taken care of. I don't want them to take away Social Security because I'm an elderly woman. I need that. Is and I don't want them to take away things from pregnant women or other people who are in genuine need to give them a leg up. But once you get that leg up, it would be, well, what what the Seymour thrift store has done here was set an example to everybody that, my goodness, we can do it ourselves. And
I agree.
that,
Mhm.
that's beautiful. So that's exactly the way you think too. And that's the way your parents thought. But we'll see what happens anyway.
We'll
Um,
see. Mhm.
I'm an optimist. I'm an
I know
optimist, and I
that.
and I also believe that whatever happens happens for a reason.
That's true.
Do you have any examples of that you'd like to share? Things happening for a reason?
Yes, I
Like
do,
what?
and
Oh,
I'll
goody.
take you. I'll take you back. Okay. There's a story that keeps coming in me. Over the years. So one time I was driving from Dar es Salaam, which is the capital of Tanzania. Right next to the Indian Ocean. For those of you who are not familiar with those countries in Africa.
Hmm.
So I was driving a 36-hour drive through Kenya and then make it to Uganda. So I'd driven like 12 hours and I got tired. When you're sitting on your steering wheel and you're like this and you feel like you're tired, your shoulder needs to rest and then try to lean towards the steering wheel.
Oh yeah,
So
I
soon
happen
as,
to know that feeling.
huh? You've done
I,
that? Hmm?
well, I only get it 12 miles. I do 12 miles and then I stop and take a nap,
Well,
and then
I
I do
did
it
it.
again.
I did it for 12 hours. Of course, you got to get gas in between
I'm
that,
12 miles. I'm 12 miles. I fall asleep at the wheel. It's terrible. It's a good way to get a rest. Anyway, go
And
ahead. Continue.
so yeah, I was, somehow I felt like leaning towards the steering wheel, just to relax my shoulders. And as soon as I went to the steering wheel, the hood opened up, shattered my windshield.
What
But the
shattered
good,
your windshield?
the
What?
hood, like the in Uganda we call it the bonnet, uh, but in the
Oh,
US I think we call it the hood. Yeah,
the
yeah,
hood came up.
yeah. Came up,
Oh my
went up,
gosh!
and smashed the whole windshield, and it all spotted it within there. But the good thing I was on the windshield, so I covered myself in there, and everything just flew in. And I was driving probably around 80 miles per hour or so. So
Timing is everything.
oh, crazy. That felt like I was flying from heaven to the ground. Okay. But anyway, so I was able to, pull over, but here I am, no windshield, and you could
And
ask me
not
a question.
blinded. You would have been blinded with the glass.
I know, but nothing. I didn't get even a single cut. You
God,
know.
that's amazing.
Yeah, that
And
that's what I'm saying. So you're right there, you're trying to relax, and then all of a sudden you get this boom, an explosion, on you. But then you look on yourself, no cutting. So I pulled over for a second. I'm like, what am I gonna do? But you could ask your question, why did I pull over? I pulled over in what we call Savo, or one of the biggest, wildlife forest or jungle. There was several, lions or stuff like that. Pull over, no cars. We don't have any AAA there. We don't have any EMS, or there's not even a cell phone signal in those locations. But I pulled over somehow, and I'm like, I'm not gonna keep driving. Let me walk over and sit. There was a rock like on the road, by the side of the road. So I sit down and I started remembering. I'm like, when you get into the thing, you begin saying, God, why are you doing this to me? Why are these kind of things happening just to me? Because problems after problems. I mean, maybe I can picture with some of the viewers. When you get in those moments where you're after finishing or dealing with this problem, another one pops up, and then another one is even worse than all the three that you've gone through. So I'm
yeah,
sitting there, I'm like, why God? Why God? And then all of a sudden, something positive came in me. It's like, hey, what if you're being saved from whatever you've gone through? First of all, you did not get a single card. What if this is, just killing some of the time so that you can go smoothly or go through whatever you're going through the rest of the 24 hours so peaceful? Well, that pumped my spirit, and I felt, energetic that I can do this, I'm alive. Try to do something, cover that wood back, and then maybe drive 1 mile per hour or 2 miles per hour until you find the next trading center or some kind of center somewhere. Anyway, I go in, clean the car, and then I start driving. It didn't take long, maybe a good 30 minutes, 1 hour, and I found a center where I was able to, replace the windshield, and they kind of screwed in the the hood in it, and I was back on the road. But what I learned from that experience is like we ought to turn negative into positive, regardless of any challenges we face on a daily basis. Like right now, we're talking about the IRAPs or the offices up there, how they're making decisions that are not favorable to some people or vice versa. But what can we do to turn the situation around positive? Yes, I love the fact that NECA was able to rally up and say, hey, let's make it local. And then here we are. We have a new thing that is
Yeah.
even better than what we've ever had before. So I was able to go through that situation. And then when I drove after putting on a windshield, like maybe another 3, 4 hours, I found this huge accident, huge, like maybe two or three semi, or 18 wheelers that ran into small cars and stuff. And then most people died, like probably a good 8 cars
Yeah, there's
crashed.
a big accident in front of you that you would have been involved with
That
had you
probably I
not
would have been
stopped it.
in. I would have exactly.
Oh, that reminds me of something my Mr. Dejean, he was my biology teacher in 10th grade, Mr. Daniel Dejean, and he had originally taught in Bermuda.
Hmm.
And he was this enormous, affable human being. We all loved him greatly. And he was trying to teach us a little bit about what you've just described. And he said he and his friends were forced to hitchhike,
Hmm.
and their vehicle had broken down, and they were just trying to get somewhere, and they had to get somewhere. And so this car stopped, and everybody everybody in the car was inebriated, but they stopped to make fun of him because, well, they were racist and he's a black man. And they stopped and they were yelling very derogatory names. And I must say, in Bermuda, they are noted. There are two segments of society there, and there's a very thick line of demarcation in some quarters there, of which I do not approve. But they were really mean to Mr. Dejean and his friends. Well, the next car to stop was ages later because they were in the middle of nowhere. And he picked them up, and they came across this fiery, blazing vehicle with every single person completely gone, immolated. I mean, gone, burned to crisp. And Mr. Dejean at that point was a teenager. And he said, I don't know, but my life has been like that. And I mean, I was in 10th grade, and I never forgot that story or the fact that he left it with, I don't know why these things happen, but my life has always been like that. And with every negative, there's a positive. And
All right.
with every cruel action you take upon another person, you're putting yourself in jeopardy to be a victim of your own negativity.
I agree.
So if you can't be nice, don't say anything at all because it'll come back at you. In some
360. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's somebody once told me, "Oh, Heather, you're such a good person." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just petrified of karma. I'm afraid of karma, so I don't try and step on the dark side because, oh my gosh, what's it going to do to me?" But we all have those choices, and when you come across in your SASH work or in what you're doing now in Kampala, if you come across someone who is being mean to you or to someone else, how do you direct them without being bossy to lead them forward into the kindness world?
That's a perfect question. I like it. Usually people tell me, do you get annoyed? you know, like because you can step on my left foot and right foot, and I'll look at you until you turn around. So the best, somebody said the best revenge is silent. That's my way of like, if I feel like I'm reacting, I'm not going to react until I'm at the point of, until I feel like if I cannot write something down, I'm not going to say it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. You can
So
write it down and you can put it out there, but it doesn't have to touch another soul.
exactly. So I'm one of those kind of people who, of course, being in the US, living in Texas, living in Vermont, Franklin County, you have to learn to be patient and you have to learn to ignore ignorance. I call it ignoring ignorance because whenever a person is arrogant to you, they're already ignorant, okay? Because there's no way you can be arrogant to any human being around you if you're very knowledgeable and have wisdom to communicate. There's a difference between engaging someone, there's a difference communicating versus being ignorant and speak what will turn around 360 to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's how every time I interpret stuff. And I always tell my kids and I tell the people that I see or that we counsel from time to time, like, hey, if somebody came to you and say, you look like a dog,
You
you
look
will
like a
never,
what?
like a
Sorry.
dog or a
Oh,
cat or you look like an elephant or something like that, you will never be that, okay? you know, it's using that because they're ignorant or they don't know they have issues, okay? They have
they have their
issues.
own personal issues. You have to love
Exactly.
them anyway, I must say. You have to love
Exactly.
these people. And I'll give you an
Exactly.
example of that. I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Hmm.
and I had a neighbor whose son was always in my house from morning till night, and I loved him dearly. He was always playing with my children. My children were never once invited to his house because when that little boy was at my house, how wonderful was it for the mother and father who could do their own thing? And, I just loved this little fella. And we lived there 5 years, so it was 5 years of growth of that little boy with my children, which was cute. And one Saturday morning, one of my patients called and said and at that point he was the national 20-kilometer champion in the country, and he was training for the Olympic trials marathon, which was not his distance, but he was going to go for it anyway. And he called me on a Saturday morning, and the house was full of children, and said, Heather, I know you're not open today. I used to see him 3 times a week. And I know you're not open today, but I pulled my hamstring. I want to know if it's torn. Is it pulled? I'm not going to miss the trials. Can I train? What can I do? I said, come on over. So in he walks, gets on my table, children running all over the place. And oh, if you don't know, I'm a muscular therapist. And I started working on his hamstring, and it was just a little bump. So I just work it out, work it out, work it out. It took about half an hour. And I just told him, no speed work, very reserved stretching for the rest of the week, and you'll be fine. So he made it to the trials, which is great. He left, and my neighbor, the little boy's mother, came over, and she had never been to my home before. We would just across the fence sort of thing. She worked for Oral Roberts University. He was an evangelical Christian and not a very nice human being. And she said, I can't believe you let that sort of person into your home. It says in the Bible there's a veil over that kind of person's eyes and they'll never see the kingdom of God. And I'd never heard this before. I'm raised in Montreal. We just swear at each other in French. We all get along. We just vent that way. But I immediately went to my phone and called a woman who was teaching metaphysics at my home every Wednesday night.
Hmm.
And I said, Martha, I can't stand these evangelical Christians, fundamentalist Christians, born again Christians. I said all that. Listen to what she just said. And so Martha, in her wisdom, said, Heather, listen to yourself. You can't stand them, and they can't stand the sort of person who just left your home. What makes you think you're any different than your neighbor? We're all on different rungs of the evolutionary ladder, and it seems to me that you're on the same rung, or are heading for, or were once on the same rung as your neighbor. Don't judge people. Wake up call. Complete
It
wake up
is.
call. I'm as bad as everybody else who judges people. And I mean, that's just a human nature and, an
It
environmental
is.
thing to do. But now I can at least try and catch myself when I'm trying to slap somebody upside the head verbally in my mind and say it's not my place to judge. So we don't see each other for 30 years, my friend and I, my neighbor and I. We don't see each other. We don't keep in touch. And she found me on Facebook and she said, "Are you Holly and David's mother?" And I wrote back, "Yes." Well, she said, "This is. What's your number? I'm calling you now." So I gave her my number. The phone rang. "Heather, I just want you to know something. When the lawyer next door to me on the other side of you left, he sold his house to the following ethnic group of people." And I don't know, here we go, ready to fight.
Mhm.
I'm biting my tongue. And she said, "They became my best friends. I thought you'd want to know." And
Wow.
so I had an epiphany when Martha told me to smarten the heck up and quit judging. And Barb was given the opportunity by God's grace to meet, get to know, and love the people she formerly vilified.
Right. Wow.
And that's what you always hope for. And then to
Right.
tell me that, to call me 30, 40 years later to tell me that, my goodness. I mean, talk about closure, and it's a beautiful story. But I had to learn
Yeah.
my lesson that way too.
Yeah.
I learned my lesson. She gave me that lesson. She was put in my life for that lesson.
Exactly. And usually, when the things like this happen, I always tell people filter yourself, analyze yourself before the other person, because if you get to know where your problems are, then you're going to be in peace. You're going to be in, because working in environments of, charity or humanitarian work, you get to realize that most of the challenges we face on a daily basis from our neighbors or people around us, we pin it to them rather than pinning it to ourselves.
Oh,
But
yeah,
if you
for sure.
discover your stuff, and have peace about yourself, then you're going to be in harmony with everybody around you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am usually. And when I'm not, um, last year I had a friend I could call and say, "Come over and talk me off the ledge. I'm not feeling really good about what's happening." So if ever you do feel that your footing is a little shaky, you can always call somebody. And if you don't know anybody, let's hope that people will go to whatever organization is around them who have perhaps complete strangers, but somebody who, with an empathetic ear, can help people
Mhm.
who are struggling with anything.
Right. Mhm.
So, hey, by the way, as long as I've got you here in Kampala, what the heck are you doing over there today?
So I'm actually on vacation.
Oh,
I'm
sorry to interrupt your
vacation.
vacation.
No, when you told
What are you
me
doing over
this year
Kampala
you guys like,
vacation?
hmm?
I don't usually hear, "Hey, I'm going to Kampala for my summer getaway here." So tell me what you're
I'm
up to.
pretty,
What do you do?
I'm pretty sure you couldn't even expect me to be on a video in this world, this part of the world, right?
I'm loving it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a peaceful place, and sometimes when I'm here, I feel like it's even way ahead compared to our little Vermont. Okay,
Well,
when it comes to technology, when it comes to infrastructure and stuff like that, versus what we hear in the news. Because when you hear in the news, like when, let's say somebody talks about Uganda, quickly people are going to pin it to Idi Amin, right?
yes, they do. And I
But
did.
yeah, most people do. At least, people who are like, 40, 50, 60 years old, older, there will be like Uganda, Idi Amin, full stop, okay? But
Yeah.
there's a lot of change here. Things are peaceful. I would love to say, not because I'm from or born here, but this is one of the peaceful African nation, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, we have, it's along the equator line. For those of you who have ever heard of equator line is the one 0 degrees, like half of the world, north hemisphere, south hemisphere. So Uganda is in the middle of it. So in other words, we have rain throughout the year.
Yep.
The grass is green throughout the year. We don't get summer, we don't get winter. So it's a mix of, like, I mean, winter never, we will never experience winter here. They don't even know snow at all. Uh,
I can send them some.
Say again.
I'll send them some.
Then you'll be the one. They'll run away. Okay.
I don't know. I love snow, but yeah, and the the population as a whole is a very gentle
It is.
population, very
Yeah.
polite.
When you go at the UN, whatever, it's ranked, I think, number one or number two human beings that are very hospitable throughout the world.
Yeah.
Mm.
You in Canada.
Hmm? And
I'm from
Canada?
Canada. Yeah,
Yeah, but
we're so
we beat Canada.
hospitable.
Though. Yeah, we beat Canada. You gotta beat Canada. But yeah, so the population here, is talking about population. This is around 45 million people here,
Hmm.
and they grow their food. They don't import foods except like electronics. But food, yeah, organic food is produced pretty much here. For those of you who don't know who eat fish, like tilapia,
Oh, I love
it's the
tilapia.
so it's right from here, Lake Victoria. Like most of the fish that are kind of bred throughout the world, they get them from here and take them all over the world. Yeah, yeah.
What's your favorite thing to eat?
That's tilapia. That's why I'm talking about it.
I love it. I love it too. I don't remember the last time I had it. I think my son made it for me the last time I had it. It
Yeah,
is
it's
so
wonderful.
delicious.
Yeah,
And it is not, I was a commercial fishing lady in the Atlantic, and I don't really have fish in my life very often because after you've worked on a fishing boat and you know how hard it is, but also you see them flopping around, and I would never eat sushi because no, I used to see a lot of that on the boat.
I
I'm
know.
terrible. But if you offered me tilapia morning, noon, and night, I'd take it. And I did not know it was from Uganda. It's more well
Yeah,
traveled than I am. And let's
yeah,
see.
it
So,
is. I mean, we have
and
the organic one, but most of the ones we eat out there, some of their, farm, like the farmed kind of fish. They farm them or they do whatever they do. But here, it's like kind of organic. You'll find Lake Victoria is the biggest freshwater lake in the world, by the way.
I know.
So fish is in there, like they don't do nothing about it. You just go catch away whatever you can catch. But
And
tilapia
not
is the
only that,
most. Mm, mm.
the pollution in Uganda is minimal.
Yes, it's very minimal. Yeah.
You've got great air quality. And now Lake Victoria, I just read something that it's a very clear, clean lake. Maybe I was reading something in National Geographic.
You're right.
But it is one of the cleanest lakes in the world, as well as the
It
biggest.
is. It is. Yeah,
Well,
it
gee,
is.
do you swim?
Yeah, I do. Not a professional swimmer, but I love being in the water. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely not be afraid to go into Lake Victoria. That would be an honor.
Me too. I've
I would
been
like
I've been
that.
in it several times. But Lake Victoria is the source of the longest river in the world, the Nile River. If for those of you who don't know, so also the Nile River, the source of this Nile River is from right here.
Yep. And every year the Nile floods and makes everything around it fertile.
That's
When
true.
the floodwater goes down, it gets here we have to put on phosphates. We spread all kinds of stuff. We spread all sorts of things on the land to give it new life for the next year. So in the spring, you'll see the tractors. They'll go around. They'll spread the manure from the manure pits between April and November, but they also spread stuff that they can. They buy it in Swanton,
Right.
around where you live, and you'll see them spreading all that beautiful white stuff all over because we have to rejuvenate the earth because we take so much out of it, and we
Mhm.
rotate crops because we try and give the alfalfa over here, we'll grow the corn here, and then we'll grow the corn there, and then the alfalfa over here, just so they eat different nutrients. But
Right.
thanks to Lake Victoria and all the water that flows out of it down the Nile, they
Hmm.
never have to fertilize because
They don't. Yeah.
it floods every
Yeah.
year with new nutrients. They get a new topsoil. Ooh,
Right.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
glad we don't.
They have that topsoil, and you can plant anything anywhere, it will grow. Anything, what I mean, anything you can. Like in Vermont, we can't do certain plants. You cannot bring a palm tree in Vermont. You're wasting your time. Here, you'll bring it from anywhere, it will grow up. And then on top of that, you say the Nile flooding down the Nile.
Yeah,
Actually, the Nile also goes up. Okay, it's the only river that flows northwards. Uh,
yeah,
it does a great. You're right. It does help as far as irrigation is concerned. People like in the northern countries like Sudan and Egypt, if that now didn't exist,
Mhm.
those countries would not exist because that's the only source of water they have. And also, wherever it is, the soil is fertilized. Like, people plant everything along the shores of the Nile River too, as well.
Well,
As
if it's
much
not
as,
too much,
go ahead, sorry.
sorry, if it's not too much trouble, could you bring some of that earth back to Vermont when you come?
Then
Just
I'll be detained. I'll be detained at the border. Okay.
in bags.
Huh?
Well, I'll admit something to you about being stopped at the border. I used to have a newspaper called The Optimist. I had it for 30
Mhm.
years. It was a subtle counter suicide newspaper for teenagers in 28 states, teenagers and young adults in 28 states and 4 countries, one of which was Kenya. And so I would deliver it up to Montreal from Vermont. I never fell asleep at the wheel because kept having to stop to deliver. Well, I was at a school, St. Jude's School in Montreal, and I found a baby squirrel when I was going into the school. And I figured, oh, you're so cute. Your mummy will be here to pick you up any minute. Well, I was in there talking to Cliff Walker, the principal, for about an hour. I'm leaving, and the squirrel is still there. So, of course, I stopped and talked to it for a while, and it was apparently orphaned. It didn't actually tell me that, but I assumed. So I picked it up, and I said, I'm going to take you home and raise you. I'm going to name you Rocky. Well, when we're coming to the border, I'm thinking, well, now I bet he won't ask me if I have a squirrel down my shirt. So I put this squirrel down my shirt, little baby,
Oh,
I've got this very perky looking blouse. And the guy looked and he said, "Hi Heather, did you bring anything back? And did you buy anything in Montreal?" I went, "No." But he never once asked me if I had a squirrel down my blouse.
right.
So I had Rocky for the longest time. And I was in my clinic, and he used to come with me in my clinic and sit on a bookshelf. And I was working on this fellow named Chaz. And Chaz was just relaxing because he had a bad neck, and I was just trying to get his neck. And Rocky jumped onto his chest from the bookshelf. And Chaz nearly had a heart attack, jumped up. And I thought, I'm so sorry. I took Rocky and I put him in the bathroom. And I shouldn't be laughing, but when I went to get him, he had drowned in the toilet. I had not put the toilet lid down, and my poor little Rocky had drowned. So my next patients came in, and I was doing CPR on this little squirrel, and it didn't work. So much for my lifeguard skills. But I'm sorry, I should not have gone off on this tangential story. But when I'm just talking about going across the border,
I know. I
you
know.
better, if they don't ask, don't tell. For me, might mean going through the border. I did the same thing with a seagull, but he was in my glove compartment. And they never asked me if I had an injured seagull in my glove compartment.
Wow.
So I don't lie, but don't ask,
You
don't
don't say
tell.
what you don't have to say. Okay. Right.
Don't do as I do, Daniel.
I'm
Don't
not.
do as I say.
I'm not. I'm not. I promise you, viewers, I'm not gonna do this.
I won't do it. And I won't do it again ever either.
Yeah.
But if you see an animal injured and you live in a different country and you're not going to let him run around, it's kind of
No.
like
No.
home
Yeah.
based. What are you going to do? Leave him there to die? No. So, what else would you like to talk to me about before we bid each other adieu?
So I would also want to tell you that I've worked with Kairos International. I think you already know about
Yes,
that
yes, yes.
organization. So Kairos International is an organization that was founded almost 20 years ago, and we take teams all over the world. That's why I'm privileged to travel the world, doing lots of humanitarian work. It started with simple 5 pillars. One was women endeavoring to eradicate poverty, and we with an acronym of WEEP,
Mhm.
WEEP. And then the next one was child in need. And the next one we were doing like excursions, because most organizations when they do humanitarian work or go on mission work, they strictly pin it to religious kind of things. We were like, no, we're not doing that. So we're going going in the communities, doing whatever we can as far as charity is concerned, and then we don't need to burn out. Then we do mini safaris or mini excursions and get to, hit two birds with one stone, And we've been doing that ever since, and at the beginning we were like, oh, we're gonna go help, we're gonna go help. But we came to realize, you know, 10, 12 years ago, that all the people that we've traveled with, from the US, from Canada, from England to this, third world country, instead of completely changing the locals, the people themselves, the volunteers, their life changed completely by
As
just
it
being,
should be. As it
yeah,
should be.
yeah, by being exposed to this world and seeing like you go whereby somebody doesn't have a bank account, somebody doesn't have what we call a home, somebody doesn't have a closet, but they are so smiling, better than somebody who even has maybe $100 in an account. You know what I mean?
Of course.
They have, they're so joyous and they welcome you. They even want to give you whatever little food they have in their house because they're so excited you came to visit them. Which is completely different. And by just being exposed there, people's lives change. I would love to say, like, if for those who are Bible readers, there's a Bible which talks about the Good Samaritan.
Okay, yeah.
When like the guy was beaten up by robbers on the road, just to paraphrase it, and then all people were bypassing by him, and then this guy who was not even next, who was foreign to him, sees him bleeding to death, carries him without even knowing his name, and begins taking care of him. And the wrong run to this is like, when we bring these people, they come in here thinking, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But we've
Mm-mm.
seen a lot of people's life change, like, to be honest with you, a lot of missionaries, like right here in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi, those who came with us for even 3 days, they went back to the US or Canada or the US, I mean, or England. And then after 2 years, they're like, hey, I feel like I know my call. I'm going to go live in this place or this place. And this is what I'm going to do. And I'm like, hey, it's up to you. It's your call. But, we have right now around seven Americans that are residing 100% right here in Uganda doing the work. They've constructed schools, they've constructed community health centers, they've constructed stuff. But just because of one humanitarian trip, just to navigate on the five pillars we're working on, because we were taking care of, like networking women, like women endeavoring to eradicate poverty, trying to help children. And then that's another thing that we break the narrative. Like every time you go in third world country, we talk about sponsors. We talk about, I need somebody to give me this so I can go to school. So, and then I'm an orphan. Let's construct an orphanage. For us, we were like, no, constructing an orphanage does not help an orphan, but it creates stigma to this child to grow as an orphan the rest of their life. We were like, why don't we help them from where they are by creating some program? And so one of the program we created at the beginning was about the zero group, like a merry-go kind of thing. Like we go in the community, find these ladies that are taking care of their children or taking care of their grandchildren who lost their parent. And they were like, hey, we see you having a little piece of land here. If we came in and bought more seeds, do you think you can even plant? If you've been cultivating 1 acre, can you do 10? If you have the tools and seeds that you're liking, they're like yes. And some of them will be like, we can't. But if we worked with another 10 women in the community, that will make it easier. Then we network all the women's within the community. Instead of, gardening 1 acre, they ended up gardening 10 or 30 or 50 acres as a group or community group. And then they have enough food in their home. And not only just enough food, and then they sell some, and they have now some income that can help them, take care of their medical needs, take care of their health needs, take care of their school needs. So then over time, we're like, hey, they're good at this. it also actually changed the narrative of, when you go to most third world countries, actually even developed world, men tend to be on top, like as in they're superiors,
Yes.
like even when their wives or spouses are working more than they do, or they earn more than they do, they still want to feel superior. But when you come in the third world country, you'll find these ladies uh, waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning before dawn and going to cultivate lands. And then during the harvest time, these guys, they'll go get the harvest, sell it, and then they will end up spending all their nights in bars, drink and drink. And then the kids cannot go to school. The kids cannot, their medical health cannot be met because there's no funds. And yet, there was enough produce that they could use to mitigate those needs, so but by networking women's in the community, that was we didn't know at the beginning that's going to change the mindsets in community, the men or women mindsets in the
You
community.
emp-
But
you
go ahead.
empowered them. You
Huh?
empowered them. You
We did.
empowered them, and
Yes,
nobody can take away what you earn yourself.
you
I've just been
cannot.
I've just been told I have only a few minutes to talk with you left. Daniel, will you come back and be on the show again to get to the other uh, three pillars of Paul that we haven't touched on?
No, yeah, no problem. Yeah, anytime.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen watching Life is Good, thank you for watching. We've got Daniel here, and how small is our world, and how lucky we are if we were born to be servants, because there is no better position in the world than a humble servant, and no better thing to do in life than make do and other good things. When you are a servant, you look to help each other, and then because of karma, you all get it back anyway. But Daniel, you are an amazing young man, and I am so grateful that we've spoken today. And just thanks. I'm glad you're on Life is Good, and please do come back
Will
when
do.
you're back.
Thank you.
Say hi to Uganda for me, and Tanzania, and
Will
Kenya,
do.
and Burundi, and any other country you visit with your missions and with everything else you do. All my love to you and your family.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me.
Mwah. Bye, everybody. See you next week, and we'll see Daniel again. He lives in Enosburg Falls, Vermont, for heaven's sakes. We interviewed him from Kampala, Uganda. 3 cheers. I'll talk to you soon, Daniel.
Thank you.